Welcome, everybody, to another Unauthorized Caucus. This week, we're actually doing something a little bit different, so you might have a weird lag in time. If something crazy has happened tomorrow, we'll do this. But tomorrow is today, or rather, today is yesterday, I guess is what I should say, because Andrew and I are pre-recording this week. Not something that we like to do, but we're both here for it. I actually have an event carved out in the middle of the day here on Thursday, and it was just going to push us either really, really early or really, really late. And I know that a lot of you really like that noon time, so we figured we'd stick with it. We had a couple of topics to talk about that will still be prevalent no matter what time this airs. So we wanted to bring those to you today. But let me first say, in addition to the welcome, please like, share, and subscribe if you're not already. There are a lot of people who watch this who don't subscribe to the channel, which is awful, and you should change that. So go ahead and hit that big red subscribe button, turn on the notification bell if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Facebook, hit the like and follow. If you're on Twitter, follow us and hit the retweet button, or just take this link and send it to a friend of yours and say, you should watch this too, and then we should talk about it. Because that's the whole point. Unauthorized Caucus is our opportunity as conservatives to get down into some of the issues, go a little bit behind the headlines that we're seeing, and have some bigger conversations before we get to big decisions that we all have here coming up in 2024. So, with that in mind, Andrew, you and I were talking a little bit about this, the same thing that the Supreme Court was talking about, just as a setup here, and then I want you to dive off into some thoughts. The Supreme Court heard two cases, the 28th, February 28th, the last day, they heard two cases regarding the cancellation of student loan debt that the Biden White House is proposing. Now, the Supreme Court and pretty much all of our judicial system has not currently been very helpful to the Biden administration's agenda, which is really nice. It's, as a conservative, it's not often that you feel like the courts are on your side. So that's a new change. But thank you, President Donald Trump, by the way. But this is definitely an issue that is going to be ongoing. But it kind of begged the question, what about college loans? What about federally backed student loans? How has this changed the college game? Because we often talk about liberal influence in education and higher ed just being permeated with Marxists and how awful it is. But what about the actual value of a college degree, and then what has happened to it as a result of loans? Let's dive into that. So this was just arguments. The Supreme Court didn't set forth any kind of decision, but it begs the question, since they were hearing questions and asking them, it begs the question. So here we are. Andrew, what do you think? What do you think about the Biden student loan cancellation, or student loan debt cancellation, and then just about student loans in college in general?
Well, I think that it's a campaign promise he's trying to keep, and it's like socialism light, Ryan. The government stepping in and paying and redistributing, and that's really the thing. It's not the government paying your student loans, and that's how so many people push it is, well, the government's, stimulating education and promoting the progress of science and useful arts, right? Which we know constitutionally is patents, right, Ryan?
Yeah, that's it.
We've taken that and we've applied that to so many things, and now we're going to apply it to student loans. That we're going to promote education. We're going to no. This is the American taxpayer paying vastly, in my opinion, for these people who go out and get crazy degrees that can't afford them. They don't have good return on investment. These degrees that many people go into debt for, and they can't pay them off because guess what? It's really hard to get a degree in futurism. Now, this is something, we didn't talk about this, Ryan, but I was actually looking this up the other night, and it had nothing to do with this topic, but I was looking up the craziest degrees that are offered. And the University of Houston in Texas, right? So many people talk about Texas, and they love Texas, and I like Texas too. But they have what they call...
Wait, is this the breaking news that you're lambasting Texas? Are you an anti-Texan?
I'm lambasting Texas.
My goodness.
The university in Houston, at least. And anyone who's from Texas will say, you know what, Houston's not us, right?
Anyone who's from Texas can ask me for Andrew's address. I may or may not know that. So
most pure-blooded Texans will disassociate with Houston and Austin and that kind of stuff. But University of Houston is offering a degree in futurism. You can be a futurist, Ryan. Now, what's that? It's somebody who looks at internet trends, social media trends, and they help and consult companies in knowing the future.
Well, to be fair, both of us are futurists today because today is actually tomorrow as far as pre-recording this video goes. But
that's right.
Neither of us have any formal training or degree in this, to be clear, everyone.
Right. But somebody's going to go into $60,000 in debt to become a futurist. where they essentially study these different things and try to predict trends. And no, this is ridiculous. If you go to Carnegie Mellon University, you can get a degree in bagpiping. You can get tons of different degrees. It's ridiculous. I'm pulling out some of the most obscure. Yeah, the bagpiping. Yeah. But Egyptology, these are different degrees that people get. Okay, floral management, jazz studies, right? These are different things that, they're not bad. You can get a degree in pop culture, puppet arts. I'm just going down the list. These are sexuality studies at Ohio State University. I'm picking out some of the craziest ones. But the point is, Ryan, is the government's now encouraging people to go into debt with the promise, if they'll keep it or not, who knows? Government's making promises and not keeping it. But you can go into $60,000+ of debt and become a puppet master and get a master's degree. And you know what? The government will pay it off, the common man. And this is the thing that bugs me the most, Ryan. It's the blue-collar workers that pay taxes, that maybe went to trade school, they paid off their debts, they did it the right way. They're now going to be paying for these wokers and their liberal arts degree that they can't go out and get a job that pays more than $35,000 a year doing. And now we're going to reward that.
Now this begs the question, though, because you made an interesting comment that I agree with. The government's encouraging you to go out and get into debt for doing whatever, all these different random things that don't necessarily pay, but you're able to go into major debt for them. So here's another interesting point, and I'd like to raise this as a possibility. And by the way, I'm going to set forward from here on out. This is the opinions of Andrew Muller and Ryan Haidt. This does not necessarily reflect our employer's official positions, although I will say you will find this all across the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles website, from Phyllis's writings to John and Andy Schlafly, her sons, to the stuff that we do now. There is a huge question to be posed here. It's not just that the government has now convinced people to go into debt for things, but I would say as a result of, and tell me if you agree or not, as a result of the federal government guaranteeing loans, guaranteeing people tens and tens of thousands of dollars to spend on something, whether it's worthwhile or not. Because of that guarantee, schools now offer more and more and more stupid things than ever before, because more and more and more people are going to college than ever before, and they're charging more than ever for it because they can, because they know that the federal government has backed these loans, so people are able to just spend whatever they want, to do whatever they want. And we can offer all sorts of silly things at a higher price tag than ever before, because everyone's coming and everyone can afford it, because a lot of it has to do with federal guarantees on loans. So what does this do? Well, now the market is saturated, higher education market is saturated with incredibly stupid degrees, and all of your degrees are now costing more, but all of your diplomas are now worth less because there's more than ever of them before. A 4-year degree counts for nothing. If you're looking out in the job market now, you might have heard it said, but really this is the source of it, that a master's is the new bachelor's degree. That's because everyone in the world has a bachelor's degree. It's not valuable anymore. The master's degrees are really now that first level of we pay attention, it seems, or is increasingly becoming so. Why? Federal government guarantees it. Everyone goes and gets a college education. Everyone's college education is suddenly worth a little bit less, and a little bit, it's like inflation. We're just printing diplomas faster than ever for a lot of ridiculous things, and now it's not that big a deal to have a 4-year degree. Everyone has a 4-year degree. So when did that start? And is it necessary? Now I'm about to go down the Mike Rowe path right here, and I'm unashamedly so. Mike, if you're seeing this, please hit the retweet button. Feel free. We'll link to your podcast too if you do. Only if you do, though. If that's a quid pro quo, I guess I'm allowed to do that one. But what do you think? What do you think about that postulation, Andrew? Does that make sense to you, or do you think no, I'm absolutely crazy in my estimation there?
Definitely not crazy, Ryan. And it's like you said.
Thank you for your confidence.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's kind of this idea where now there's almost a monopoly between the government and the education department. Wow, I guess no one knew that. No one knew that the government was working with educational systems. But is there going to be a monopoly now where the government's going to promise to bail out the schools and they can raise the prices and everyone's, all the fat cats are going to get, all this money and you scratch my back, I scratch yours. You definitely see that happening. But to speak to kind of the cheapening of the currency, even though there's two sides to it. There's side A where, hey, if you had a bachelor's degree in the 70s, right, that makes you a more sought-after employee. But now in 2023, a lot of jobs are requiring a bachelor's degree that shouldn't require a bachelor's degree. There are so many good jobs out there that you do not need a degree for, but now they're requiring a degree for it because it's so accessible. Everyone has one. It's been lowered and dumbed down where anybody can have one. And these people that come out of universities almost seem dumber than when they went in, right? But we even see this in high school level, Ryan, where the government's starting to influence people's trajectories. And there's a lot of controversy over this, but the STEM programs and the government encouraging STEM and trying to groom people into STEM careers. And I'm really against that, Ryan. It's not because I'm against science, technology, engineering, and math, but I'm against the state grooming people and trying to fit them into the Caucus society where the needs are most evident. I don't like that.
It
If
almost
people want to
sounds like
voluntarily
we
fill
were
those
at the
needs,
same lecture last week. Almost.
kind of, yeah, Brian, right? Yeah, but I mean that's exactly what's happening. And you know, this is stuff China does, not America.
Right.
In the hypothetical realm, we need more mathematicians. So we're going to force you to be a mathematician. You're starting to see these flavors of that in the public education with the push of STEM type programs. And I don't like that. I don't like it when the federal government does anything to enforce some sort of educational pathway. So I definitely see that. Now, if you want to go get your surf science and technology degree from Cornwall College, you know, you can absolutely do that. They offer that. It's a real degree, and you can go be a surfer. But it should be, hey, I'm taking this loan out. It's going to be a good ROI, return on investment. Okay, very basic ideas here. I'm going to be able to kind of reap what I sow and pay this back without having to rely on the plumbers, the electricians, and the people who went out and actually make money and pay off their debts and live a respectable life. If you want to do that, go for it. But if the government's going to work with colleges to raise the prices, offer less, dumb it down, add woke liberal ideology to that to cultivate their Marxist cesspool, and then have the common rank and file Americans bail them out because they can't get a job to pay off their loan, garbage.
Yeah, and I mean, you knocked on the door of it right there. I mean, I made the reference, and I'll, for everyone else, I'll clarify. Andrew and I both were at a lecture here in St. Louis last week. Dr. Brian Ray, who heads up the National Home Education Research Institute, NHERI, NHERI.org, .com.org. I think it's .org. If you go and look, I mean, what he's talking about is homeschooling, and where that's a viable, statistically, it is viable, it is good, in fact, even better for kids. It is not harmful for kids. He's the one who goes and does studies that, of course, are not popular because you're taking things out of the system of state education, which this is exactly why. A lot of people are now looking to get out of state education, realizing that inherently, when bureaucrats begin to run the education system, which is exactly what the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education is and why it ought not to exist, what's it going to do? Well, the state's going to look out for the state. And especially when you have installed people who are statists, who are big government, not small government, what are we going to do? Well, we should use the education system for the betterment of the state, which means, how do you fit into the state? So all of a sudden, fill in the blank. We've gone under all these different names, whether it's, Common Core, No Child Left Behind. What these have done, in essence, although there's a lot more to that, I'm just going to hyper generalize for a second here. We're talking about a lot of workforce training style stuff that, first of all, it does really kind of make kids dumber, because especially with Common Core, that really kind of showed that side where you're not teaching them to continue learning. You're teaching them to be limited, to only know how to do things the way that you've taught them, to fill in certain blanks, but not create their own blanks and answer questions that haven't even been asked yet. I mean, like, you go through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Reformation, all these were not people who were trained that led these movements and these empires throughout history through state standardized education. This is a very new thing, and it's really limiting to kids. But part of what it does is, how can we figure out how to fit you into society? Because we need good little, bakers and machinists and candlestick makers and all the different things. Like, that's really at the base where our modern education system has come from. It's a state-run, state-centric system that is for the good of the state, not for the good of the individual, not for the good of children, not for the good of future society. It is the good of this society, these little cogs inside this little machine that we have going right now, which is why it came from, well, it didn't come from a European dictator. He picked it up from a bunch of ridiculous Americans. But the Prussian model literally was adopted first at a state level by a European dictator, because this was good for the state. well, that's not how we've ever done things in America. So when you kind of take a step back and look at it and say, this is, where we're going, which is why we're pushing people toward this or that or the other. But then also we've got all of the cultural stuff that comes in. There's all these politically correct layers to it. And now we're just making up degrees and everything because everyone should go to college because it's not necessarily what you major in. We just need you there for the 4 years to make sure that we can teach you the values that we need you to understand, even if it doesn't come with specific skills. But if you're exceptional, we'll teach you the skills that we need you to have in society. It's this whole, this thing starts to unravel the more that you look at it, you look at the history of it, you look at the understanding of it, and it's just this explosion of, this is all so awful. This isn't good for people. No one should go to college anymore. And if you look back at, really, it only used to be about a third or even less of society, not that long ago, that went to an education of higher institution. You've got lawyers, doctors, engineers, but other than that, there were trade schools and apprenticeships and all of these things were considered higher education, and an advanced degree or 4-year degree and then graduate stuff. That was in very, very, very certain fields. But then all of a sudden, we're just sending everyone to college. And I could talk about generations and World War II and the greatest generation and baby boomers and all that. But we're opening a lot of cans of worms. But this is a very interesting thing to think about. And again, this is kicked off by, can the Biden administration just point blank, forgive, expunge federal student loans? That's not how that works because the taxpayers didn't vote on this and we're the ones who've paid for it. So it begs the question about all of these different things. And I don't know. I don't think either of us here are offering a solution. What we're doing is, as we always do each week, offering a question and then posing that and kind of having some of these things out because this is the kind of stuff, especially for someone like me. I've got young kids. This is in my future to think about, to talk about, to raise kids with. What do you want to do for your education when it comes to what's your purpose in life? What are you good at? Now, for us, we come from a biblical understanding. Obviously, what has the Lord made you to be good at? What's His plan for your life? But everyone has a passion and a certain set of skills. Look at that, and this is going to become a conversation for me. Andrew, you're not married, don't have kids yet, but there are a lot of other people, grandparents, parents of older kids. This is stuff that we should all be talking about, whether it has to do with us individually as families or with national policy. And it's so much bigger than just should we be able to, expunge student loan debt or let someone do it or not. So let's back up and hold on a minute here. What about federal funding for schools? And what about state bureaucratic control? And when I say state, we mean the state, not states versus the federal level. But these are a lot of very important things that need to be covered and discussed. And it's a whole, as you've just heard here from what Andrew and I have both brought up, this is a whole can of worms of all sorts of stuff that you could go off into their own separate conversations. I don't really have anything else to add to the education side. You have anything you want to leave us with on that topic, and then we'll maybe run into a couple more?
I do. I just want to give a caveat because when you talk about this, so many people take the disposition, well, you're against education then. And that's not the case. We're not against education at all. Actually, what we are is we're for education in the purest sense, right? Critical thinking, reading, writing, oration, these type of skills. That is not going on at the college level by and large in a stereotypical manner. But what is really happening is kids are being groomed in public school, and we all know this. Go back and watch prior episodes that Ryan and I have done on the public education system, and then they're being sent to, graduate school and college, and these worldview type concepts of Marxism and socialism and just the cesspool of liberalism is then being cemented in them, and they're creating this society in their own image in a humanist perspective, in my opinion. And you hit the nail right on the head, Ryan, when you said the whole idea of apprenticeship and being trained in a skill set, whether that be privately or on your own in self-study. I hate it when you have this conversation with people and you talk about maybe not having college be the default plan for every single person. You're treated like a radical. But this is the history of the world. It really wasn't until not too long ago where everyone started to go to college and they took their dog with them. Everyone and their dog went to college. That's a new idea, Ryan. And the society, if you look back, you brought this up when you mentioned the Reformation and some of these different time periods, even the Founding Fathers. These were not men that were institutionally educated at a public high school or a college, but you bet your bottom dollar they were educated. And they were educated by reading, writing, discussion. and these very classical educational concepts that have been around for hundreds and thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of
yeah,
years.
I gotcha.
And that works out really well. It's not until the last 75, 100 years where we've seen this encroachment upon people saying you have to get this institutionalized education. And you have to ask why, because it hasn't made society better.
Yeah.
So why are they pushing it so hard? Is it because they're in cahoots with the state and they're trying to maybe push some sort of an agenda? Right? I think we really have to start asking those questions, Ryan. And it's not that we're anti-college. You can go to college, but make it something like you said, doctor, lawyer, something in the medical field that really requires it, right? But if you're going to go for, surf education or whatever it may be, I know that's the silliest of examples, but it's a reality. I just don't buy into that. And even in the areas in which it matters, like doctors and lawyers in this upper education, we're seeing what's being taught and the results and the people that are coming out of those institutions. You don't get what you pay for, Ryan. And a common story, if I can kind of transition to this was kind of breaking a little bit this week, was the Senate Judiciary Committee and a Biden-appointed individual who is going to be in a circuit court who, I'm going to try to say her name. Her name is Charnel Belkangren. I'm gonna go with that. Belkangren. We're gonna just stick with that.
Sure. Yeah.
But Senator Kennedy. Yeah.
Senator Kennedy didn't even say her name. He said the judge there to the far side, so he skipped the name because he's on TV. It was actually pretty smart.
Judge there to the far side. Yeah. He asked her, what is in Article 2 of the Constitution? Awkward, dead silence, a couple blinks. It doesn't come to my mind right now. What's Article 5 of the Constitution? Couple awkward silence moments, couple blinks. It's not coming to mind right now. What's proposivism? He asked her that. In my 15 plus years of being a judge, I've never had that question. For those of you who don't know, proposivism, simply defined, looking at the purpose of a law. That's what that means, okay? Article 2, that sets up the presidency, by the way, the executive branch of government, which is the very entity which appointed her to this position that she's now seeking the advice and consent of the Senate to be approved. Doesn't know what that is. Article 5, right? That's the amendment process to the Constitution. And then a simple legal definition is proposivism. Has no clue. 15 plus years. She went to all these different universities, Ivy League. This is scary.
Well, and it begs the question, does she actually not know, or is she not answering? Either way, this is terrifying. I mean,
either way.
And we have another story, which, well, by the way, just let me say one thing to close out the edge. You knocked on the door. There's a fundamental difference on the education conversation that we're having. Make no mistake, when we talk about homeschool research or this or that or the other, the current conversation is not between public school and private school. Oh, you should do public school or private school or homeschool. The weirdos do, because the bad influence in school. No. The system of educating itself is broken, and on purpose. Purposefully so, it is broken because people are not trying to educate children, which is what I would advocate for. What they're trying to do is limit kids and fit them inside the box of our definition rather than educate them to go forth and continue learning on your own forever and all time that you're alive. Which is why I'm so excited to see things like classical education pop up again on the radar, which is, again, now we're talking about, classical education likely is really what a lot of homeschooling is. We are breaking the whole mold of K through 12 and standardized testing and this and that. Let's approach educating kids in a different way, because this state Prussian model system is garbage. It doesn't teach our kids. It limits our kids. So there's a distinction there. It's not just public school, private school. No. A lot of private schools follow the same educational system. That's what we're talking about. It's far beyond what used to be the conversation about public school's bad for your kids, private school's better. This is the system itself, which is a layer deeper. But yeah, on that note, talking about smartness or lying or not admitting under oath things that you don't want to, which is lying by omission. Another one, and by the way, I'm going to link all of these things in the description of this video since we don't have it live and we're not running over here with comments. We will miss all of you this week. Please hit us up in the comments or on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll reply since the chat's not open. But another good one, aside from this lady who doesn't apparently even know the confirmation, though she's been a judge for 15 years, was another one this week. the nominee from the Biden administration for the Archivist of the United States to head up the National Archives and what is NARA? N-A-R-A, National Archives
Research
and
Association?
Research Administration.
Administration.
Administration, I think it is, to head up, we hardly ever say the full name, but the U.S. Archives, to be the Chief Archivist of the United States. This woman was actually, I think it's Dr. Colleen Shogan. She came from the White House Historical Society or Foundation or one of the sides of that. She was nominated last year. They had a hearing for her last year. Biden renominated her this year with this new Congress. And she just had to have a hearing again. And she had a go-around with Josh Hawley this week, our own wonderful senator from the state of Missouri. That was, in my estimation, atrociously embarrassing. And it doesn't have to do with a lack of knowledge over this, but it is still worth noting, here is the product of the higher education system that is being forced upon us by the left, by the cultural elites, by the educational bureaucrats. These are the products, because these are folks who are older than you and I, but this isn't someone who was educated, 70, 80 years ago in America before this educational system had taken hold. So whether it's dogmatic adherence to a certain agenda or just a complete ignorance, I mean, both of these are very revealing, because just, like this lady who didn't know or didn't admit that she knew the basic constitutional things, this lady has posted some incredibly extreme political opinions. And when I say extreme, I don't mean bad or outside the norm. I just mean, like, you're not middle of the road. You are definitely opinionated to one side or the other here. And then right before the hearings, she locks down her Twitter, makes it private. And then when she is confronted with tweets that she's made, she had very much, unfortunately for her, said on the forum, oh, the only thing that you'll find on my Twitter is, and it had something to do with her books, like novels that she wrote, Pittsburgh sports teams, and my dogs. And it's like, well, that's funny. Here are a lot of political opinions. So is this about your dogs or political sports teams? And the only thing she would say over and over again, it's like when on the advice of my attorney, I've decided not to speak and incriminate myself. She's pleading the fifth, except not pleading the fifth, because all she continues to say is, my social media is under the purview of my private life. This is my personal opinion and time. I forget the line that she used over and over. And she was being asked yes or no questions, and that was her line, which is essentially saying, I'm guilty and I'm not going to talk. Well, yeah. You're under oath, your form said one thing, and now you're saying another thing, and Hawley ripped into her. Because again, here's the quality, just like this other judge, this is the quality, the product of not only what the Biden administration is putting forward to lead in government positions, but this is the product of, pardon the phone ringing in the background, this is an active office after all, everyone, but this is the product of the education system that you and I are talking about that has taken this foothold in America over the last, 50, 60, 70 years? I mean, it started before then, make no mistake, but the real foothold, federally guaranteed student loans, ridiculous, this has been 50 or 60 years now that we've been going on this, and welcome to the product of it. These are the people that are being selected to lead government. It's absolutely astonishing. And I'll post the links of these two videos because the exchanges are just mind-boggling to consider, especially when you look at this conversation we've had. What about this way of educating? Not just if it's liberal or conservative, but the actual system itself. Is it behooving us or not? And here are two shining examples, I would say, of not. Definitely not. So yeah. It's been 100%. It's been interesting. There's a little bit of everything going on this week, but it all kind of brought us back to this idea. Last week we talked about Western civilization. This week, education. There are some big topics that need our discussion. So everyone out there, we welcome your input. If you've got something that you'd like us to hit, kind of go to a topic and go for a big picture over something, have the conversation or start having the conversation, let us know. Shoot us an email, info@phyllisschlafly.com. Drop it down into the comments below or on the chat sometime because there's a lot of really important stuff. And conservatives need to understand the fundamentals, get back to basics, far more than just what's in the news or who we have to vote for or who said what. There's a lot of basic stuff that we need to understand before we get back into some really big electoral decisions moving forward. So that's what I hope to accomplish here. Andrew, I'm grateful that you're a part of this with me. I know we've gone through a few different voices here, but I think that this is always a good conversation starter. So we're about here at 30 minutes, so we should probably close it out. You got anything else for us this week? Any final thoughts before we wrap up here on this pre-recorded magic futuristic podcast or live stream that we're going to do.
Yeah, if anything awful happens overnight and Zelensky was right, and the U.S., because we didn't send enough money, had to send our sons and daughters to Ukraine. We'll cover that next week.
Into that, yeah.
But if that happens, we'll talk about it next time. If we both don't get drafted, I guess. But
well, you're the only one at risk for that, buddy. I saw the Biden AI video, and he's only talking about 20 and 21-year-olds, and down there at that end of the spectrum.
Wasn't it?
It was
really creepy.
That was creepy. That was very interesting. It just reminds you that you got to be very careful about audio and video nowadays, because that's not a guarantee like it used to be. But
yeah, drop a comment if you want us to take on AI. But these people. Final thought on this whole education thing. These people are being educated, but they're being educated in the ways of the world, in the ways of Marxism and postmodernism. And you can't have education without truth. And our academic institutions have taken on this anti-truth mentality where you get somebody like Ketanji Brown Jackson, who on paper is a very highly educated individual, but cannot offer the definition for a very biological question, what is a woman, right? There's only two choices.
Yeah.
And she got it wrong, right? So it's that we're being educated to be stupid because we're trying to revolt against truth. And that's the kind of spiritual element to it. So having these discussions, they're not anti-education, they're pro-education in the truest, most pure definition of the word, educate. And you know what? I would encourage people, if you have somebody in your life who maybe is going through, that type of discussion of, what are we going to do with our kids with education? I think what you do is you teach your kids in the way of the Lord, you teach them in the way of truth, love for country, self-responsibility, duty, family. And you know what? God will use them and direct them, and maybe a part of that's going to college. But if you're going to college with a vision for a very specified, intentional means, and you can pay it off, I see that as, if that's a part of what you feel called to, a good thing. But just this generalized, everyone's got to go because it's what everyone's doing, a little too collectivist for my liking. I think we need to be more individualistic as a country. So swim against the current, don't be stupid, and educate yourself by being a self-researcher. That's really the bottom line.
I don't have any other bottom line beyond that. Swim against the current and don't be stupid. These are the good pieces of advice in today's society, but really it's a lot more sage than you'd think it is based on the laughter. So there you go. There you have it. Another unauthorized caucus, except very authorized and even scheduled. So we, scheduled, pre-recorded, pre-taped, and launched later. So thank you all for joining us. I'm sorry it wasn't live. I'm sorry we weren't able to interact with everyone. But I will say at the very end there, I will be at an event with Thrive today. If you're not familiar with them, Thrive Nation, they started here in St. Louis, but it has spread across the nation. Incredible pro-life organization that works not just legislatively save the babies, not just some of the traditional things that we're used to. Thrive is both at a healthcare level and at a media level is changing the dynamic on making sure that we meet and take care of young women in crisis and the young babies that are involved in this as well. So they are doing an absolutely awesome job changing the whole discussion about this, and I'll make sure that we link in the description down below here if you'd like to go and see about their work, maybe even support it. That's who I'm with today, and I know that Andrew's very familiar with them. Bridget Van Means, for anyone who's followed us, she's the president there, and we've had her on a lot of our stuff. She's been at our live stream events and a lot of our in-person events as well. So that's who I'll be with. Check them out. We'll drop the links in the description down below. And we look forward to talking with you all next week. We'll be back live noon Thursday, and we will figure out how to get something spicy again and dig down into that issue. So until then, thanks everybody for watching, and we hope that you have a wonderful week.